everybody. Welcome to Psychic Teachers. I'm your host, Samantha Faye.
And I'm Deb Bowen.
And we are so excited to talk to you guys this week and introduce you to a fabulous new guest. Brandy is an intuitive and empowerment coach who spends her time guiding others and facilitating energy healing, focusing on building the subconscious capacity. She has extensive experience working with high-achieving female entrepreneurs, helping them align with financial success while staying true to their values and purpose. While they might initially come to her to scale their business and make more money, they leave with a deeper sense of fulfillment within their lives on a holistic level. So I'm really excited to welcome you to the show, Brandy. Thank you for joining us.
Oh, I'm really excited to be here with both of you. Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, we're excited to talk to you. We've got so much to cover today. So let's get started. Samantha, you want to start us off?
Well, yeah, I just would love for you to tell listeners, how did you get started with this work? Because it's something I think a lot of our listeners would like to do, but they often don't understand how to get from A to B, never mind A to Z. So just tell us a little bit about your background.
Yeah. So I spent, 15 years in corporate America, and I ran sales teams, and I always had a lot of success there. I was also an athlete growing up, tried out for the Olympics. And so I got to a point in my life where I felt as though I checked all the boxes of success, everything that everyone would say should make you happy. I had a beautiful home, an amazing husband, a small child. And then I took a step back and I felt like there was really something missing. And so I really started this work with myself. So I was client number one, where I just was like, what is it that I am missing? And when I paused and thought about it, it was the fact that I'd always approached life from this perspective that happiness would be an outcome of success. And I, at that point in time in my life, just really thought like we have to change that paradigm, because when you approach life from that perspective, it's going to be fraught with friction. You're going to have lots of like ups and downs. And really what's at the end of that success isn't actually happiness. It's excitement. You're like excited that you met the goal, and you're excited about kind of what's happening. And then you're immediately searching again, because what you're looking for is actual happiness. But to be happy, you have to make it a central tenet of your life, something that you're focused on, something that you take action on. But the upside of that is like when you're really goal driven, as I was, you can realize very quickly like what you need to put in place to change your baseline of happiness. And so that's what I did. And then from there, I just had friends who reached out to me and said, hey, I want some of that. And it started very organically.
Oh, that's fantastic. That reminds me of that Jim Carrey quote I love, where he says, I wish everybody could get everything they ever wanted so they'd realize it's the answer to nothing.
Oh my gosh. I have never heard that quote, and I'm going to write it down. It really is so true. It's so true. But we pass it on generation after generation after generation, even though, like, if I stopped you and asked you point blank, like, hey, Samantha, do you think that if you get everything you want, you'll be happy? You'll say no, but subconsciously you're still searching for it, right? And so we know as humans that it doesn't result in the happiness we're searching for, but we still kind of perpetuate it.
Yeah, well, we're sold that bill of goods, get this, achieve that, do this, and then this is your reward. I have to ask you before I let Deb get a word in edgewise, what was your sport of choice that you almost got to the Olympics for?
I was a long jumper. And so I long jumped at the University of Michigan, and then I tried out for the Olympics here in Sacramento before I moved to California. And it was a lot of fun. And I learned so much about discipline and drive, et cetera. It's the experience of a lifetime.
I'll say that's impressive.
Well, it really is. Okay. So, all right. So I'm trying to get my head around all you've done, Brandy, and all you're currently doing, and plans that you told us before we started recording about things that you've got going on for the future. And I just wonder if you ever sleep or, breathe or eat or do laundry or any normal stuff, but don't answer that. I'm just really impressed.
Thank you.
So I know that one of your passions is helping women connect to their gifts and talents. And I know that part of your agenda for that is working with people to use those gifts to create businesses that align with their values and purposes. Tell us a little bit about how you put that into some kind of a package and work with women with that.
Yes, I think that I try to make what is complex really simple, Deb. And so when I meet women, they come and they're like, hey, this business may not be working. I don't know how to scale it. Or maybe the business is working and life feels fraught with friction, right? Like their personal life. And so I've created a 4-step process and I call it BASE. And the process is really, I believe, foundational to life. And so I sit down with these women and I ask them really like, what are the beliefs that you have? So that's the B. And how have they gotten you to this place, right? And then A, like, where are we out of alignment? You know, what does happiness actually look like for you? How do you align with your happiness? And this S is really around self-awareness. Do we realize that we're really creating these situations, that we have this really amazing brain that is going to align us with that which we're seeking, but we have to be intentionally seeking it, right? And when are you falling out of homeostasis? And then E is really around emotional regulation. Like we all have this origin story, and oftentimes this origin story really involves kind of all these learnings that we've gotten from our parents. And sometimes they're great learnings and sometimes they can be a little traumatic in nature. And so how do we keep those memories and like lovingly release the reaction to it? And so through that 4-step process, people really connect back to themselves. And when you're connected to yourself, then you can flourish in all of the ways. Your business is going to be more successful. You're going to like look at life differently. You're going to kind of really realize how powerful you are. And I think that that's the gift in this lifetime, to have this knowing that you have this ability to create the life that you dream of, because you wouldn't dream of it if it wasn't meant for you.
That's a good point. The origin story, do you think that's where most of our self-limiting beliefs come from?
I do. I mean, and I think science supports it, right? From 0 to 7, our brains are in this state of acceptance, right? And so everything you say, that's why when you speak to a child, like they'll repeat back to you what you said very matter-of-factly. They think it's absolute in nature, and that is how our brain stores it. And so our brain is storing things in this way that doesn't have a lot of gray area. It's really black or white. And so regardless if you've had like, you know, kind of big T trauma like car accidents or something, you know, maybe even more impactful than that to your life, or little T trauma with your parents kind of repeating over and over again that something is bad and something, you know, you aren't doing it the right way, then we store that in our lives and we'll be running on that loop over and over again. And until we make that which is kind of subconscious conscious, and we realize like, oh, this is why I've been doing this continuously, then we can't evolve and change. And so bringing awareness to kind of those formative years of our lives and the things that we were told and how we were positioned, and they really inform the entirety of their life, right? And so I spend a lot of time with my son just focused on, you know, reminding him that most important thing in the world is that he's happy. And the second most important thing in the world is that he's kind. And we really, you know, focus our intention on those things. And oftentimes people don't hold space for children in that way.
Yeah, that is so true. And it's our job to hold space and to teach them those things. And I think it's so crucial because like you said, we're like little sponges in the beginning of our lives.
I know. And we don't even realize it, right? And so you'll like every time without fail, you talk to a client and I'll say like, well, where do you think that stems from? And they'll like say something that was like 3 days ago. And I'm like, probably not. And I'm like, let's take a step back and really like, you know, reconnect with yourself and tell me. And oftentimes people don't even have vivid memories of kind of the origin.
Yeah.
Yes.
You know, just as an aside, Brandy, one of the things that I did some research on a while back was the whole psychology of happiness. Yeah. Which sounds like a big part of what you're doing. Am I on the right track there?
You are on the right track, Deb. Yes. Yes, there is such a psychology of happiness. And again, like anything else, it needs to be studied. It needs to be something that you really work towards, right? And not work as in like difficulty, but that every day you are intentionally moving closer, right? Understanding what are the handful of things that I can be doing every single day that will raise my baseline of happiness. Because when you have a high baseline, then your lows aren't as low and you can have like these much higher highs, and you're going to get this idea that life gets to be easy, and you're going to see synchronicities, you're going to see flow in your life. All of these things come kind of through that process.
I believe it. It's a hard thing for us to live, I think, when particularly when, as you say, we've grown up with the naysayers, as my father was,
Yes, we all have naysayers. And I think that the first step is just to make it easy, right? So I tell people, if you can't work with anyone else, there are 3 things that you should be doing for yourself that's going to allow you to more easily align with happiness, right? And so the first thing is really around this idea of having a strong gratitude practice, right? So if you, Deb and Samantha, you have me on today, and at the end of our podcast, I just like jump off and I'm like, bye, and I'm not like, thank you, right? Then you may not invite me back, right? And so I tell people to think of the universe in that way, right? Like if there is something that comes to you that you clearly would like more of, the first step is to sit in this place of appreciation. And then from there, right, this idea of journaling, so that those circumstances and happenings in your life that have occurred, you really need to get those out on paper, right? Because they're in your head and you don't even realize it. So the more we can have a journal practice that's more specific around asking yourself, why am I here in this place, right? So if there's something that you're circling around that you see showing up over and over again, really journal about it, because the answer is within you. And then, thirdly is really meditating. So we talked earlier about these little ones and how, their brain, your brain is in delta for the first early years of your life, which is why you sleep all the time. And that's where our brains are when we sleep. And then it moves into theta until we're about 7. And then as we become adults, we're in beta, but we have to teach our brains to go back into that alpha and back into that theta state to really slow down. It's a time of reception. It's a time, I believe, of communing with the divine. It's really a time where you can get really clear guidance around your life. And so you can do those 3 things, right? And start small, then you'll see that you really do have power over your level of happiness, right? And then you can start calling in more and more things that are aligned with what you're seeking.
Those are great tips. And it's about getting in the driver's seat of your life. Now, when you're talking to people about meditating, I'm assuming you might sometimes get some pushback. God knows Deb and I do. So how do you teach meditation to your clients? I think different meditation works for different people, right? So yes. How do you handle that?
Well, I really start with like mindfulness, right? Because you're not most likely, it will be more challenging to go from being in a constant state of beta and then slowing down your brain waves on the first try, right? So it's just like, hey, take some quiet time, right? Like, are you ever just sitting with yourself? Again, another way to really connect back to who you are. So let's just start with a quiet time. And if a client is really like pushing, I'm like, just take a minute, just take a beat, right? Like just sit for a beat and get to know yourself. And then I usually actually use kind of binaural beats for them to, and I always say that word incorrectly, but for them to really like help their brain slow down. And so then from there, we transition into like having on the headphones and having kind of that alpha sound. But I sit in this space of saying, right, like just inviting people to it. Because at the end of the day, change has to be an inside job, right? Like I can't want anything more for you, Samantha, or anything more for you, Deb, than you want for yourself, and vice versa. And so, I think our clients come to us and they ask for our guidance, and then I meet them there and I invite them to kind of join me on a journey that I know. But I feel like even if in the moment they don't do 100% of the things that I recommend, kind of like placing those ideas with them, it'll come back. Like I think of things that I've heard many years ago, and then it comes back and it's like, oh, okay, God was like placing that in my experience then, even though I wasn't ready for it, so that I could come back to it when I was prepared.
Well, and it's nice to have someone that you're accountable to as well. I think that encourages us to stay on the path and do what's good for us. And like you said, even if you're throwing out 10 things and they take 3, that's 3 more than they had before they met you.
Absolutely. Right. And it's like, I say it's like exercise. When people are like, what's the best exercise to do? It's the one you'll do. So just, it's like whatever workout you'll do, that's going to be best for you.
Well, there you go. Samantha, and I'm laughing, Brandy, because as Samantha and I were setting up to record, we were talking about exercising and doing this, that, and the other. And I thought, well, maybe I can walk to the end of the block. I'm really not a big exerciser. So you've just given me a lot of encouragement. Thanks for that.
I love it.
Okay. So Brandy, my question to you next is, you work with the notion of abundance and trust in universal energy in helping women find happiness and success in their lives. How do you do that? And what practices do you suggest that they do in order to support that?
Yes, I think in terms of trusting that abundance is available to you, really the first step is trusting yourself, right? And so I think that we do work on like, do I trust me? Like, will I show up for myself? Will I do the things that I commit to doing, right? And so really teaching people that we trust others really in the same way that we trust ourselves to get things done. And so once we have kind of a foundational understanding of, like I say, I'm going to do X and then I do it, right? And we'll build a foundation around there. And then I start with baby steps around trusting the universe. And so my favorite of all time is really just starting with setting an intention that every single place you go, you will have an amazing parking spot. And it's really simple, right? Because there's no collective consciousness around parking spots. No one has a belief that no one ever finds parking spots, right? And so you can really shift that energy very, very quickly, like more quickly than money per se, because there's a collective consciousness, there's a US consciousness, there's a female consciousness, all different consciousness, family consciousness around money. So that can be a little bit more tricky to get people to kind of dial into all of those things. But with parking, you don't have any belief one way or another. So I say, set your intention that everywhere you go, you'll find a parking spot up front, and just take a second before you leave the house to kind of set that intention. And I know actually for people that seeing that come to fruition, right? Seeing this, like, wow, at first they think, oh, it's a coincidence, right? And then the other thing that I do is every week when I'm on with my clients is I ask them to report back at least 3 synchronicities, which means they have to be looking for synchronicities, right? And so when you're looking for them, they'll show up for you. And so really just this idea that, like with all things, we build trust kind of over time, and we build it with ourselves and with the universe by really communing in this beautiful way of positive expectation.
Yeah, those are great tips. Sometimes I have to work on trusting myself with everything I have going on and all the stuff I have to do. And one thing I do is I write down all my to-dos every night before I go to sleep. And in the morning, sometimes I look at it and I'm thinking, girlfriend, you're never going to get all of that done, But I flip back through the pages of my other to-do list and I realize, okay, it might take me a week to get this 2-day list done, but I always get it done. And so I think, writing it down and looking back at it and validating to yourself that you can trust yourself and rely on yourself. And it might not always be perfect or in the right timing that you want. I think that those little tiny things help to build trust.
They really do. That's a beautiful example, Samantha. I recently had a client that I wanted to share something specific with them. And so I went back into my journals, and in my journals, I also kind of like write down that which I'm seeking or want to bring into my life. And all my journals look the same. So and I was like, which journal did I write it in? But it was beautiful because I went through every journal and I was reading all of these things that I had written that I wanted in the world, and seeing just like, oh my gosh, 4 years ago, I asked for this and here it is. And that's just such a beautiful reminder of, again, how powerful we are. I still believe that I haven't tapped into the full extent of my power. I'm hopeful that in this lifetime, I am able to just continue to move closer, because it is on every level mind-boggling, just that which you're able to really create or co-create.
Yeah, I want to talk about that. And I want to talk about the fear I think some of us have of our capacity to be these powerful co-creators. But let's take a quick break before we dive into that. So we've been talking about happiness and really learning to trust yourself. And you were just talking before the break about diving into the power that's within us. I think a lot of us are sometimes afraid of that monumental power that we have. What do you say to that?
Oh, I say absolutely. And there's still some days that I, just wake up and I think that I maybe I still have it because I use the present tense, but this worry, right? Like, how good does it get to be? Right. Because we are so often taught that we can't have everything. There was this article in the Atlantic 5 years ago, and I promise no fewer than 50 women sent it to me. Like, see, she said you can't have it all. Right. And so you have this idea, and then we perpetuate it. So one, I think we have to really have a clarity around what we think having it all is, right? And then two, just this idea of who says that you can't align with your dreams. I do fundamentally believe, as I mentioned earlier, that if it is something that you're seeking and you have a good reason for it, then it is meant for you, right? Like, I don't dream about, things that I don't really want in this world. And so I agree with you that we have this fear of really stepping in to all that is possible for us. And so instead of us all stepping into it, we all convince each other that it's not possible. And I think there's this really amazing opportunity to shift that. And I think the world is ready for it, to say that we do get to be all that we want in this lifetime. And that's actually why we came to this planet, is to experience that.
So let me ask you this, Brandy. How does intuition play into this?
Yes, I love it. So I'm not a big resolution person, but my 2023 resolution was to follow my intuition like 1,000%, no matter how little it is, right? Like last week, I was looking for something, and it was just before I was jumping on a Zoom, and I got a ping, like, go in your office and get the computer set up, like right in the midst of me, like about to look for something. And of course I come in my office, and what I was looking for was in my office chair. Right. And so I think that our intuition is constantly trying to guide us, and we are always overthinking it. Just a couple of weeks ago, I said to a client, I said, so this was a client who was very spiritual. I said, so it feels as though you fundamentally think that you know better than source. And she paused and she looked at me. She's like, well, that's not true. I said, oh, you just gave me 5 examples of where you took your own, like you charted your own course and it didn't work out, even though you are saying you have a knowing. And I think when I say I try to really simplify it for people, that's what that is, right? Like when I choose me over my intuition, I'm fundamentally saying, like, I think I know better than the divine, than infinite intelligence, than God, like what the next best step for me will be, right? And we don't have the capacity to, really think at that level. And so as we co-create, as we follow our intuition, we're going to see that life gets better and better and better. And so again, I think you start with the really small things that you feel comfortable handing over, and then you really can grow from there.
Yeah.
But I see it in my life personally, every time something doesn't go as planned, and I don't have any more in my life, like big things go wrong, luckily, but like every time there's even a little hiccup, I think back like, oh, I got a ping about that. And I just like moved right through it.
Yeah, which goes back to your tip about journaling so we can remember those things.
Exactly
I have a
right.
friend who's been looking for a job for about 6 months, and she's in her 50s now, and she's thinking, I don't know, is ageism a thing? Like she was having a hard time, right?
Mhm.
And she finally gets this great job offer, great job, good company, good benefits. And she's not one who typically follows her intuition, right? And she kept saying, I don't know, I just feel like I'm not supposed to accept this job. And she couldn't believe it. And she eventually turned it down. And 2 weeks later, her dream company had a job opening. She interviewed and got hired. And
Yeah.
she's like, oh my gosh, maybe I should follow my intuition. I'm like, yes. How about that?
Oh, that's such a beautiful example of
Yeah,
the
but it
power.
can be scary, I think, for us
Mhm.
to trust
Yeah.
that
Right.
still small voice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I bet for that, right? Like the story sounds good a month later, but for those
Right.
2 weeks, I'm sure she was like, did I do the right thing? Did I do the right thing? Right. Like, I'm
Yes,
sure.
and she'd be sitting in meetings at her current job texting me like, "What the hell was I thinking?"
Yeah. Right.
But it all
Um,
worked out.
but then it's such a beautiful ending.
Yes.
Yeah.
Brandy, so many of us, I've certainly been here and can go back there sometimes, is that self-doubt
Mhm.
that, oh, did I interpret this correctly? That intuitive hit. Is this really where I'm supposed to be? Do I deserve this? All those yeah buts, as I call them.
Yes.
How do you work with women with those?
Yes, I love that. Well, one is really spending a lot of time differentiating fear from intuition. Because I think early in your journey, they show up the same, right? So there's this like intuition, I shouldn't go outside and walk alone. And then there's like fear of just like every day, no matter what, walking alone in the dark is bad for me, right? And we have to differentiate. Like, I tell people that, like, we have all the answers. You have to just get back in touch with yourself. So, how do we sit in this space of really saying, like, is this fear? Is this my lower brain kicking in, not even letting information get to my high brain and help me make the right decision? And so a lot of it comes from clearing. So I do a lot of like energy work where we're kind of clearing away fear and we're just reconciling some of those emotional issues that we mentioned earlier. And I think that energy work really helps people to like help differentiate fear. I would say that for people who, if they're not doing energy work, we'd really talk about just sitting really still and really just asking yourself, is this fear guiding me, or is this intuition? And the more that you speak to God, the divine, your higher self, right, the more likely you are to be able to differentiate it. I think we're using the same brain that created the fear to try to get the answer. Probably not going to be the way to get the answer, right? But oftentimes, even if I have clients that don't believe kind of in their higher self, you can just say like, hey, why don't you ask the version of you 2 years from now? Like, what did you do in this moment? Right. And because time is really just nebulous. Right. So just say like, hey, Brandy, like, how did we get over this chasm? How did we cross this space? And the more you learn to kind of have those conversations and really be as rational as possible, which is not easy. Right. But when I talk back, I said, a woman the other day, she said, well, I just don't know if there's anyone out there for me. And I said, okay, so there's 8 billion people in the world, and you think there might not be anyone for you, right? Like, and when you put it like that, people are like, oh yeah, well, when you mention it like that, but we can still kind of sit and ruminate over these issues. And so trying to be as rational as possible, either having a conversation or a prayer with God, or simply asking your future self, like, hey, kind of, what is it that I'm meant to do? Is this my intuition? Is this my fear? How do I release this worry? It goes a long way. These things seem so simple because they are. I just think like the rules of the universe aren't as complex as we've made them.
That's
We
true.
just
We
have
like to make
abide
them
by them.
complex.
Yes. My goal in this lifetime is to simplify them for everyone, many people as possible.
Okay, what about people who say to you, I really would like to be an entrepreneur. I'd like to run my own business, but I don't really know what my passions or talents are. How do you help people find that right at the basic beginning?
Yes, I was that person, right? So I actually stopped working not to go into this work. So when I was in corporate America, it was really just like I was covering the United States, I was covering Canada, I had a little guy, and I just didn't really want to be away from him. I also knew that it wasn't really aligned with me to forever be home. So I was like, okay, what is it that I'm meant to do? And I spent a fair amount of time with that, right? And I think, I don't mean to sound repetitive, but these processes are fairly similar in that we have to, again, reconnect with ourselves. I spent a lot of time journaling, right? And also just making lists, like what are the things that make me the most happy, right? And so the things that made me happy were like having conversations with girlfriends about how we can be the best versions of ourselves, right? And so as you dial in, like these are the things that I love to do, and this is how I can monetize that, right? And so then you start to put the pieces of the puzzle together. But I also tell people that the Martin Luther King quote, like, you don't have to see the entire staircase to take the first step, right? It's like, just start moving forward, right? Like if you know that in this lifetime you were meant to be an entrepreneur, right? Then you can just start to take steps towards that in a way that really feels good to you. And again, kind of when we're on that path, we can very easily understand kind of this, like what's right for us and what's not right for us by the density of the emotion. So these high vibe emotions, they feel really good to us. And that's how we know we're right on the right path, right? These more dense emotions like anger, fear, and worry, they're a good sign that we're not moving in the right direction.
So, Brandy, tell us about what you've got coming up. We're really excited to hear more about what are your plans for the future.
Thank you. So I am going to launch a course this summer that I'm really excited about. It's going to be called the Joy Blueprint. And it's really a way of taking this work and helping people kind of move through it at their own pace, right? And so instead of getting on calls with me every week, I've really am in the process of downloading all that information into this weekly course. And they can sign up for it at my website, get on the wait list, www.brandymichelle.com. And then I'm also in the process of continuing to do group coaching, and I have some one-on-one coaching. And then I love if people just sign up for my journal. I write a journal that comes out on the 1st and 15th. It's free for everyone. And you can also find that on my website, and it'll get to your inbox.
Oh, that's a great idea. So they get like journal prompts every month?
Well, no, I call it my journal entry because it's based on like conversations that I have with clients, or if I'm on a podcast where I really get a ping, like, oh, this is something that I'd like to share with the world. And so they're journal entries. But at the end, I do give kind of practical tips on how they can implement whatever we're talking about. And then I ask a question that can allow them to kind of move to journaling or to thinking about kind of how that shows up in their life.
Take something with them. I think that's what I feel your work is about guiding them, but also giving them a piece that they can take with them to help affect real positive change. And I love the name of the course, the Joy Blueprint.
Me too.
Thank you both.
That's great. So folks, if you're listening and not being able to see the name of this podcast, let me spell Brandy's name for you. And we'll also, of course, put this material in our show notes and on our Facebook page. But Brandy is Brandi, and her last name is Michelle, Mechele. So if you want to look her up on her website, that's how you do it.
Yeah, and her Instagram is @BrandyMichelle. So we'll put all of that in the show notes and on our Facebook page as well. This has been such a joy getting to know you. I hope you come back on the show.
Oh, thank you so much. It's been a joy getting to know you both, and I'd love to come back.
I have learned so much during this hour, and I needed this podcast episode. So, Brandy, thank you.
Oh, thank you, Deb. That means the world to me. I really appreciate the time.
It's great tips, and it's good reminders, too. You know what
absolutely.
I mean? It's really good reminders that happiness is a daily thing. It's not an end result, and that all the tools are really within us. And I think, like you said, those are simple tools, and yet we need those reminders every day, don't we?
Yes,
we do over here.
We do.
Most people do.
Oh, Brandy, thank you so very, very much.
Thank you guys so much for listening. Please remember, as always, to be the light. for yourself and others.
Take care, everyone.
Thank you for listening to Psychic Teachers, your podcast for seekers, lightworkers, mystics, and magical thinkers. If you like the show, please tell a friend or leave us a review wherever you listen to your podcast. For more information, check out our Facebook page, Psychic Teachers, or our websites, samanthafay.com and debbowen.com. I have a new book out called The Awake Dreamer, Lucid Dreaming, Astral Travel, and Mastering the Dreamscape. You can find it wherever books are sold. Thanks for listening and have a great week.